Imagine for a moment being able to actively shape your thoughts, maybe enhance your focus, or even truly understand the very fabric of your conscious experience.
Yeah, for centuries, that's been the stuff of philosophy, mysticism, spiritual practices.
Right, but what if we told you it's now firmly becoming the realm of hard science? We're talking about hacking the mind.
And not in some far-fetched sci-fi way, but with real, measurable neurobiological interventions that are actually changing what we understand about ourselves.
Today, we're embarking on a truly fascinating deep dive into hacking the mind, the science of dreams, meditation, and altered states.
We've pulled together a whole stack of sources, scientific articles, research papers, really insightful analyses, giving us an in-depth look at the neuroscience behind our, well, most profound mental states.
We'll journey from the nightly adventures of dreams to the deep, disciplined focus you can get through meditation.
The transformative experiences induced by psychedelics, and even into that mysterious, sometimes frankly terrifying realm of near-death experiences.
Our mission for you today is really to unpack the science behind these phenomena, to show you that these aren't just, mystical or inexplicable experiences.
Exactly. There are measurable manifestations of underlying neural processes happening right inside your own brain.
We'll explore how these incredibly diverse states, from the peaceful calm of meditation to the sometimes bizarre landscape of a dream, actually share a profound common mechanism.
Which is the modulation of key brain networks. And there's one network in particular, the default mode network, or DMN, that just keeps cropping up.
Ah, the DMN. Yeah, it seems central to our sense of self, our internal chatter, maybe even how we perceive reality itself.
Precisely. We'll trace a path from traditional practices, which you could see as a kind of gradual, long-term hack on these networks.
To things like psychedelics and these emerging neurotechnologies that offer much faster, more direct ways to intervene.
So as we dive into the intricate workings of the human mind, let's keep some really big questions floating around.
Like, what does it truly mean to be conscious? Can we, as humans, deliberately alter the very core of our being, our sense of self?
And crucially, as we gain this unprecedented power to literally hack our minds, what profound ethical questions start to emerge about identity, autonomy?
And the future of consciousness itself? These questions are for all of us. Let's unpack this incredible journey together. Okay, let's start right at the beginning with a question that's, well, puzzled humanity for millennia. What is consciousness?
It's the big one. Historically, it's been this profound philosophical enigma, something thinkers have debated endlessly.
You think back to someone like John Locke, way back in 1690, trying to pin it down. He defined it as the perception of what passes in a man's own mind.
Which was foundational, absolutely, but it still left its essence very much in the realm of speculation. It felt intangible, right?
Totally. We all experience it every waking moment. It's the fundamental canvas of our existence, but defining it scientifically, in a way we can measure and study.
That's one of the most ambitious projects in modern science.
So how is modern neurobiology shifting this conversation, moving beyond just speculation?
Well, the aim now is really to ground this centuries-old debate in empirical research, to pull it down to earth, so to speak.
Meaning?
Meaning we're trying to identify precise, measurable relationships between our subjective mental states, what it feels like to be you, and objective brain states, what's physically happening in your brain.
Bridging that classic mind-body gap.
Exactly. Moving from pure speculation to quantifiable data. And this requires identifying what we call the neural correlates of consciousness, or NCCs.
Okay, NCCs, neural correlates of consciousness. So these are the minimal set of neuronal events needed for a specific mental state.
That's the idea. The minimal brain activity sufficient for a particular conscious experience to occur.
But is it really like finding a simple physical switch for a feeling? Or is it, way more complex? What are the challenges here?
Oh, it's definitely not a simple on-off switch. It's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
NCCs are about identifying the what and how in the brain that correspond to your subjective experience.
And how do researchers even begin to do that?
They use some incredibly advanced empirical methods. We're talking about tools like functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI.
Right, that shows blood flow changes, indicating active brain areas.
Exactly. Then there's electroencephalography, EEG, which measures the brain's electrical activity with amazing timing, millisecond by millisecond.
And PT scans, too. Positron emission tomography.
Yep, PT tracks metabolic processes. These techniques let us record real-time brain activity changes.
But how do you link that brain activity to someone's actual feeling?
That's the crucial step. These objective measurements are then correlated with the subject's personal first-person reports of their experiences.
So you ask them what they're thinking or feeling while they're in the scanner.
Essentially, yes.
Uh-huh.
It creates that vital bridge between the objective data we can see and the subjective experience the person is having.
That makes sense. But does finding these NCCs solve the whole consciousness puzzle?
Well, here's the thing. Establishing NCCs is absolutely essential for building a causal theory of consciousness, but it doesn't solve what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem, right? Me.
That's the deeper, really profound puzzle of why. Why do certain neural processes feel like anything at all? Why isn't it all just dark inside, just neurons firing without any subjective experience?
Right. Why does the physical process create the feeling?
Exactly. It's a question that continues to challenge the very foundations of our understanding. But NCCs are an indispensable part of the journey towards maybe one day getting closer to an answer.
That distinction between the how, the NCCs, and the why, the hard problem, is really important.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, let's talk altered states of consciousness, ASCs.
Right. The report defines these as measurable deviations from our normal, everyday waking consciousness.
And it points out that these states are actually regulated by complex structures deep within the brainstem and diencephalon.
Areas that also govern our fundamental sleep-wake cycle.
Which tells you immediately this isn't some, ethereal, mystical, separate from our biology. It's rooted deep down.
Precisely. And crucially, this deep dive frames ASCs not as purely mystical experiences that defy explanation, but as analyzable neural processes that can be deliberately changed or, hacked.
That's the core idea we're exploring today, then, that these states can be understood and even intentionally modified.
Yes, that's the central conceptual framework. The idea is that by comparing all these diverse altered states, dreams, meditation, psychedelics, even near-death experiences, we can uncover common underlying neurobiological principles.
Shared mechanisms that allow the brain to shift its state regardless of how that shift is triggered.
Exactly. And as we'll see later, new neurotechnologies represent an even more direct, maybe even causal hacking of these very principles. It really pushes the boundaries.
Okay, so direct intervention's not just observing. To understand how we can hack consciousness, we probably need some theories about how it works in the first place.
Right. The report highlights two major theoretical models: global workspace theory, GWT, and integrated information theory, IIT.
Let's start with GWT, Bernard Baar's theory. It's described as a functionalist model.
Yeah, functionalist meaning it focuses on what consciousness does, its function. It suggests consciousness arises from the global communication and integration of information across different brain regions.
So the idea is most brain activity is unconscious specialized, like different departments.
Kind of. And consciousness emerges when important information from these specialized modules is broadcast into a sort of global workspace, making it widely available for other processes like memory, planning, decision-making.
It uses that metaphor of a theater of consciousness, right?
Exactly. Think of a stage. The actors are the contents of your consciousness, what you're aware of right now. The spotlight is your attention, highlighting certain actors.
And the audience.
The audience is all those unconscious processes in your brain that can receive and use the information being broadcast on stage. The neural substrate for this ignition, this broadcasting, seems to involve areas like the prefrontal cortex and parts of the temporal lobe.
What are the strengths of GWT? Why is it influential?
Well, its strength lies in how well it helps explain a lot of the data we have on things like wakefulness, attention, working memory. It's very intuitive in describing how information becomes accessible and shared across the brain when we're conscious.
It makes sense for explaining the process of awareness, but what about the feeling itself? Does IIT offer a different angle?
It absolutely does. IIT, developed by Giulio Tononi, is a very different approach. It's a deeply mathematical framework.
Mathematical. How do you apply math to consciousness?
It actually attempts to quantify consciousness. It proposes that consciousness arises from integrated information.
Integrated information.
Yeah, the idea is that a system is conscious to the extent that it integrates information. This integration is measured by a metric called A, or phi.
Phi?
So a system with high A, like a human brain, presumably, has a rich, complex, conscious experience. A system with low A, like maybe a simple thermostat or a basic computer program, would have minimal or no consciousness.
So it literally tries to put a number on consciousness. That's kind of mind-boggling.
It is, and it's grounded in what Tononi calls phenomenal axioms, basically, fundamental truths about subjective experience itself. Things like consciousness always feeling unified or being highly specific.
And where does IIT locate consciousness in the brain?
It points to systems with a high degree of both integration, lots of interconnectedness, and differentiation, lots of distinct states. The thalamocortical system, the complex network connecting the thalamus and cortex, is a key candidate.
What's the main strength of IIT then?
Its mathematical rigor is its strength. It provides potential basis for quantifying consciousness, which allows for a more objective approach, even if some of its underlying philosophical claims are debated.
Okay, so GWT focuses on the broadcast process. IIT tries to quantify the integration itself. They sound quite different.
They are, in approach and philosophy. But what's truly fascinating and really important for our discussion today is that despite these differences, both theories converge on a critical principle.
Which is?
Consciousness is fundamentally a product of information integration, how information is brought together and processed in the brain.
Wow. So GWT describes the process of that integration as a broadcast, while IIT tries to measure the amount of integration.
You could put it that way, yeah. They focus on different aspects, but the core concept of information integration is key to both.
That convergence feels significant. What's the biggest takeaway for us if consciousness is fundamentally about information flow and integration?
It completely reframes hacking the mind. It means consciousness isn't some untouchable essence or just a given. It's a process, an informational process.
And if it's a process?
It can potentially be influenced, modulated, maybe even engineered, whether it's meditation changing attentional networks over years, a drug-altering neurotransmitter activity, or a device directly stimulating neurons.
They're all fundamentally manipulating that informational architecture of the brain.
Exactly. That's the profound common thread we're following. Your conscious experience, what it feels like to be you, is tied to how information flows and integrates in your brain. And that means it's potentially amenable to intervention, to being hacked.
Okay, with that powerful idea, consciousness is an information process we can potentially influence. Let's start with something we all do every night, yet still find pretty mysterious: dreaming.
Ah, yes, dreams. The report describes dreaming as the state where your mature brain is highly activated, but it's disconnected from external stimuli, from the outside world.
And typically we lack that deep self-reflection we have when we're awake,
Yeah.
right? It's like watching a movie unfold without realizing we're the audience, or sometimes even the actor.
Precisely. It's a kind of unconscious narrative. And your sleep cycle, which dictates when you dream, is regulated by a really complex interplay of different types of neural cells.
Which ones?
Well, you have aminergic inhibitory cells. They release neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine, which tend to dial down overall brain activity, helping initiate and maintain sleep.
Okay, the calming ones.
Then you have cholinergic excitatory cells. They release acetylcholine, which ramps up brain activity, particularly during REM sleep, the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs.
So it's a balance between calming down and activating specific systems, and specific brain networks are involved in the dreaming itself.
Yes, research points to two main networks. There's a posterior system involving areas like the temporoparietal junction, or TPJ. This seems to influence sensory aspects of dreams like the colors, the sounds, the feeling of movement.
And the other one?
An anterior system involving the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. And interestingly, damage or lesions in this frontal area can actually lead to a complete stop in dreaming, a condition called anonyria.
Wow, so you can actually lose the ability to dream. That really highlights its biological basis. Now, the purpose of dreams, that's been debated forever.
Oh, absolutely. For a long time, the activation synthesis hypothesis was dominant, proposed by Hobson and McCarthy.
Right, the idea that dreams are just the brain trying to make sense of random electrical noise bubbling up from the brainstem during REM sleep.
Exactly. Which implied dreams didn't really have inherent meaning. They were just your cortex trying to weave a story out of randomness, like seeing shapes in clouds.
Which is probably how a lot of us still think about weird dreams, just random brain static.
Understandably. But modern research offers much more sophisticated functional theories now.
Like what?
Well, one prominent idea is memory consolidation. Dreams might help the brain replay, sort, strengthen, and integrate memories and information learned during the day.
Okay, that makes sense, like filing away the day's experiences.
But then there's another really fascinating idea which helps explain why dreams are often so bizarre and illogical. It's called the overfitted brain hypothesis.
Overfitted brain, what does that mean? Like a suit that's too tight?
Huh. Sort of. Think about machine learning. An algorithm is overfitted when it learns the training data too well, including the noise and specific details, so it can't generalize to new situations. It becomes too rigid.
Okay. So how does that apply to the brain and dreams?
The hypothesis suggests that your waking brain is constantly learning, adapting, becoming very efficient at specific tasks and patterns. But if it only did that, it could become too specialized, too rigid, overfitted to your daily routine.
And dreams prevent that
How?
by introducing noise, discord, randomness, the bizarre, unexpected, illogical events. Dreams might act like a nightly reset, shaking things up to maintain cognitive flexibility, adaptability, and even creativity.
So the weirdness isn't a bug, it's a feature. It stops our brains getting stuck in a rut.
That's the core idea. It prevents the brain from becoming too efficient at the expense of flexibility. So those fabulous and unusual events aren't just random noise. They could be a vital mechanism for keeping your brain adaptable and ready for novelty. That is a genuine aha moment. It reframes bizarre dreams completely.
Yeah.
They're like a natural nightly consciousness hack the brain performs on itself.
It's a powerful perspective, isn't it? Thinking of dreams as functional, not just epiphenomenal.
Absolutely. So if dreams are a natural hack, what about a state where we become aware within the dream? Lucid dreaming.
Ah, lucid dreaming. Yes, that remarkable state of knowing you're dreaming while you're still asleep. It's a fascinating hybrid state.
Hybrid how?
It combines features of both waking consciousness specifically, self-awareness, and the ongoing REM sleep dreaming state.
And you said it's a great example of a natural consciousness hack. Why?
Because it directly shows that metacognitive awareness, thinking about your own thinking, knowing you're in a specific mental state, can be activated during sleep, a time usually associated with its absence.
And we can actually see this in the brain.
Yes, we have objective neural correlates. Lucid dreaming is linked to a notable increase in activity in parts of the prefrontal cortex, specifically the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and bilateral frontopolar areas.
Which are involved in.
Self-awareness, critical thinking, planning, volitional control, exactly the kinds of higher-level functions that are typically dampened down during normal REM sleep.
So the part of your brain responsible for knowing, this is me, thinking this thought wakes up, while the rest stays in dreamland.
That's a good way to put it. And incredibly, scientists can verify this objectively.
Oh.
Dreamers can agree beforehand on a signal, like moving their eyes left, right, in a specific pattern, to indicate they've become lucid while they're still asleep and dreaming. Researchers monitoring their eye movements via EEG can detect this signal.
Wow. Communicating from within a dream. That provides really compelling, verifiable evidence connecting the subjective experience of lucidity to specific, measurable brain activity.
Exactly. It shows self-awareness isn't just an on-off switch tied to wakefulness. It can be activated or hacked even within the dream state.
Okay, so our brains can naturally generate these altered states, even moments of self-awareness during sleep. What happens when we deliberately train our waking minds? Let's talk about meditation.
Right. Meditation offers a way to intentionally cultivate specific mental states, and the effects aren't just temporary. They can lead to lasting changes in the brain. The report calls these trait effects.
Trait effects meaning they become part of your baseline.
Yes, ingrained characteristics. For instance, long-term meditators often show an increase in gray matter volume, basically, more brain cells and connections in key regions.
Which regions?
Areas like the prefrontal cortex, crucial for attention and executive function, and the insula, which is involved in self-awareness, body awareness, and emotion processing.
And there was that mention of meditators' brains appearing younger? That sounds almost too good to be true.
It sounds amazing, but studies using brain imaging have shown that experienced meditators tend to exhibit a slower age-related decline in gray matter volume compared to non-meditators.
How could that possibly work?
Well, the thinking is it might be linked to several factors, maybe stimulation of dendritic branching, creating more complex connections between neurons, or synaptogenesis, forming entirely new connections.
So, building a more resilient brain network.
Possibly. Also, meditation is known to reduce stress, and chronic stress can damage areas like the hippocampus, important for memory, and the hypothalamus, regulating hormones. So less stress could mean less damage over time.
Okay, that makes biological sense. And how does meditation achieve this? What's the actual hack happening moment to moment?
A key target, going back to what we just... Yes. And second, to gently but firmly redirect your attention back to your chosen focus, maybe your breath, or bodily sensations using brain networks responsible for attention and executive control.
So it's like, there goes the DMN again. Okay, back to the breath. Over and over.
Precisely. And it's that repetition, that constant cycle of noticing the wandering and redirecting attention that strengthens the connections between these networks.
This neuroplasticity in action, right?
Yeah.
Rewiring the brain through practice.
Absolutely. It's a clear manifestation of neuroplasticity, the brain reorganizing itself based on experience. Over time, this gives individuals greater voluntary control over their attention and their emotional responses.
And specific effects, like on anxiety.
Yes. One of the most notable effects observed is a reduction in the activity and even the size of the amygdala, the brain's fear and alarm center. This leads to decreased reactivity to stressors, less fear, less anxiety. You're literally training your brain to be calmer.
So meditation is a trained, methodical, long-term hack to gain control over attention and emotion by modulating networks like the DMN. What about a more spontaneous state that seems related? The zone or flow state.
Ah, flow. Yes. That intense state of energized focus, Mihaly called it, where you're completely absorbed in an activity, action, and awareness merge. Time can distort, and your sense of self often fades away.
It happens when your skills perfectly match the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Like a musician lost in playing, an athlete in the zone, a programmer deep in code.
Exactly. And while meditation is a deliberate practice, a training regimen, and flow often arises more spontaneously, neurobiologically, they're remarkably similar.
Similar how? What does the brain look like during flow?
It has a unique signature, but one that echoes aspects of deep meditation. Just like meditation aims to quiet the self-talk, flow is characterized by a significant reduction in activity in the prefrontal cortex and, crucially, the DMN.
So the inner critic goes offline, that loss of self-consciousness people describe.
That seems to be a key part of it. The brain regions involved in self-monitoring and rumination quiet down, allowing for effortless absorption in the task.
Is there anything else happening neurochemically?
Yes, the flow state is also accompanied by a release of neurochemicals like dopamine.
Ah, the reward chemical.
Right. Which causes those feelings of pleasure, engagement, and reinforcement. It makes the state feel good, makes you want to stay in it and seek it out again.
And the report mentioned something about brain efficiency during flow.
Yeah, the brain seems to exhibit a flexible and modular neural network topology, which basically means it optimizes its connections and activity patterns to operate with maximum efficiency for the task at hand. Less wasted energy, more focused processing.
So comparing meditation and flow really highlights something important.
It really does. You have two different strategies. One deliberate, trained meditation. One spontaneous, emergent flow, leading to a similar core neural outcome. Modulation of the DMN, enhanced focus, reduced self-consciousness.
Meditation is like the long-term training that builds the capacity.
Exactly. It trains the brain to control these networks, building that mental muscle through neuroplasticity and modifies the brain's hardware over time.
And flow is like the state that arises naturally when that trained, or sometimes untrained but highly skilled brain, meets the right conditions.
Precisely. Flow can be seen as a natural state that arises from mastery and optimal challenge, but the neuroplasticity induced by practices like meditation can make accessing such states potentially easier or more frequent. They're like two sides of the same coin of altering consciousness, one intentional, one emergent.
Okay, so we've covered natural hacks like dreams and trained ones like meditation and flow. Now let's shift gears to chemical alterations specifically, psychedelics. How do these powerful molecules actually hack the brain?
Well, they work through distinct pharmacological mechanisms. Classical psychedelics think psilocybin from magic mushrooms, or LSD, primarily act as agonists at serotonin 5-HT2A receptor.
Agonists, meaning they activate these receptors.
Yeah.
Like mimicking serotonin.
Exactly. They mimic serotonin, a key neurotransmitter involved in mood, perception, cognition. And binding to this specific receptor subtype, the 5-HT2A receptor, is thought to be crucial for their profound hallucinogenic and perception-altering effects.
Okay, so that's LSD and psilocybin. What about something like MDMA? It feels quite different.
It works very differently. MDMA isn't primarily a direct receptor agonist like the classical psychedelics. It's mainly a serotonin and to some extent dopamine releaser and reuptake inhibitor.
Meaning it floods the brain with serotonin and dopamine and stops them from being cleared away quickly.
Precisely. This surge, particularly of serotonin, is thought to underlie the heightened feelings of empathy, prosociality, and emotional openness associated with MDMA.
So different mechanisms, different subjective effects. But what's the common thread in how they hack the brain's networks, especially thinking back to our discussion of the DMN?
This is where it gets really interesting. A central neurobiological finding, particularly for classical psychedelics, is their ability to temporarily disrupt, desynchronize, and decrease the integrity of the default mode network.
They scrambled the DMN, the network tied to our sense of self, that inner narrative.
Essentially, yes. They reduce its activity and its functional connectivity, how well different parts of the network communicate with each other. And since the DMN is so involved in self-referential thought, rumination, and maintaining our stable sense of identity,
Disrupting it leads to that feeling of ego dissolution people often report, the sense of self-dissolving or merging with the environment.
that's the leading hypothesis. This temporary DMN disruption is thought to be a core mechanism behind ego dissolution. It makes the brain operate in a more flexible, less constrained way, allowing for the breaking of deeply ingrained patterns of thought and behavior. It's like shaking up a snow globe.
A mental reset.
Hmm.
And MDMA, does it affect the DMN in the same way?
It does affect brain networks, but its most notable effect seems to be on circuits involved in fear and emotion processing. It significantly reduces activity in the amygdala.
The fear center.
Right. And it seems to enhance activity and connectivity between the hippocampus, memory, and the prefrontal cortex, emotional regulation, potentially promoting fear extinction learning.
Fear extinction. Like learning that something previously scary isn't dangerous anymore.
Exactly. This is why MDMA shows such promise in therapy for PTSD. It seems to allow patients to revisit traumatic memories without the overwhelming fear response that usually accompanies them, creating a window for therapeutic processing and recontextualization.
This sounds incredibly powerful, not just for, expanding consciousness, but for real therapeutic applications.
Absolutely. The view is shifting rapidly. Psychedelics are increasingly seen not as standalone cures, but as powerful catalysts for psychotherapy.
Catalyst. How so?
The clinical trials, which are showing really promising results for psilocybin in treating severe depression and MDMA for PTSD, emphasize the synergy between the drug and therapy.
It's not just about taking the pill.
Not at all. The substance seems to create a temporary window of neuroplasticity, a period where the brain becomes more malleable, more receptive to new learning, new perspectives, and psychological change.
So the drug opens the window, and the therapy helps you, rearrange the furniture.
That's a great analogy. The brain's usual rigid patterns and defenses are temporarily softened, allowing the therapeutic work to be much more effective in establishing new, healthier neural pathways and perspectives. It highlights that these aren't just passive pharmacological hacks, they're tools that create optimal conditions for active psychological work.
It's fascinating to compare this directly to meditation again.
It really is. Meditation is this gradual, effortful process, practiced over months and years, to gently weaken the DMN's dominance and increase cognitive flexibility.
While psychedelics seem to achieve a somewhat similar effect, disrupting the DMN, increasing flexibility much more rapidly in minutes or hours through a direct chemical intervention.
Exactly. So it poses that question again. If a substance can rapidly induce a state that shares neural similarities with states achieved through years of dedicated practice, what does that tell us about the underlying common principles?
It points strongly towards shared neurophysiological mechanisms, right? Different keys unlocking similar doors in the brain's control systems for consciousness.
That's certainly what the evidence seems to suggest, a shared pathway, just accessed differently.
Okay, moving from intentional chemical hacks to something completely involuntary and extreme. Near-death experiences, NDEs.
Right, these profound subjective events that can occur in life-threatening situations, cardiac arrest, major trauma, moments where the brain is under intense physiological stress.
And they often include these remarkably consistent themes across cultures and individuals. Things like out-of-body experiences, OBEs, seeing a tunnel or a light.
Feelings of overwhelming peace, encountering deceased relatives or spiritual beings, a life review.
That sense of seeing your entire life flash before your eyes. How does neuroscience try to explain these incredibly profound experiences?
The prevailing neurobiological hypothesis, broadly speaking, is that NDEs result from disturbed bodily multisensory integration or severe ischemic stress, lack of blood flow, and oxygen impacting brain function. They're largely viewed as complex, hallucination-like phenomena generated by the brain under extreme duress.
So the brain creating a final, vivid experience as it starts to shut down or malfunction.
That's the dominant scientific view, and specific components have been linked to specific brain processes. One of the most studied is the out-of-body experience, the feeling of floating above your own body.
Where has that been localized?
Research points strongly to the temporoparietal junction, the TPJ.
We mentioned the TPJ earlier in relation to dreams. What does it do?
It's a critical hub, a multimodal association area. It integrates information from your senses, vision, touch, balance, to create our coherent sense of self-location, body ownership, and perspective, where I am in relation to my body and the world.
So it's like the brain's internal GPS for placing yourself inside your body.
That's a really good analogy. And if the function of the TPJ is disrupted, maybe due to lack of oxygen during cardiac arrest, or even through direct electrical stimulation in experiments, it can lead to that bizarre perception of seeing your own body from an outside perspective.
It feels incredibly real to the person, but it demonstrates how the brain constructs our sense of being located within our bodies.
Exactly. It powerfully shows the brain's role in generating even our most fundamental sense of self and location.
So NDEs, despite being terrifying for the person often, are incredibly valuable for consciousness research, like a natural experiment.
Absolutely. They're like an uncontrolled pathological hack into the system. You don't choose it. It happens under extreme conditions, often at the very edge of the brain's functional collapse.
So by seeing how the system behaves or breaks down at its limits,
We can gain invaluable insights into how it normally works. The consistency of reports, like OBEs, and the ability to link them to specific brain regions like the TPJ, provides powerful, though spontaneous, evidence that consciousness is fundamentally a biological product of the brain.
it's like reverse engineering consciousness by watching it glitch under pressure.
Precisely. If meditation and psychedelics are intentional hacks we initiate, NDEs are these uncontrolled, stress-induced hacks. Observing them complements our understanding derived from other methods, helping us piece together the neural basis of consciousness itself.
Okay, let's shift now to the future frontier. And we have to start with a debate that's just everywhere. AI and consciousness.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. You basically have two main camps, broadly speaking. There's the strong AI position,
Which argues?
that a sufficiently complex AI, perhaps one that mimics the brain's architecture or achieves a certain level of computational power and integration, could, in principle, achieve genuine consciousness. Self-awareness might even emerge as an unintended byproduct.
The sort of sci-fi scenario, but one that some serious researchers are considering,
Exactly. Then you have the weak AI position.
which argues that AI can only ever simulate intelligence.
Right. That it lacks true understanding or subjective experience, no matter how convincingly it behaves. John Searle's famous Chinese room argument is a classic articulation of this.
The idea that manipulating symbols according to rules isn't the same as actually understanding the meaning behind them.
Precisely. And underlying this whole debate, again, is the hard problem of consciousness. How can subjectivity, that inner feeling of what it's like, emerge from just processing information, whether it's in biological neurons or silicon chips?
Where does the scientific community generally stand now?
Well, most researchers would agree that current machines, even the most advanced AI, are not conscious in the human sense. But it's a fast-moving field, and it's interesting that a small percentage of the public isn't sure.
Which highlights how complex this is, philosophically and emotionally, especially when theories like IIT exist.
Exactly. If IIT is correct and consciousness can be quantified based on information integration, then theoretically any system, biological or artificial, could be conscious if it has a sufficiently high score.
So IIT could potentially provide a mathematical basis for assessing AI consciousness. That's huge.
It's a profound implication, and one reason IIT is both influential and controversial. It forces us to confront what consciousness is beyond just its biological substrate.
And as AI and robots become more physically human-like, we run into another fascinating psychological phenomenon, the uncanny valley.
Ah, yes, Masahiro Mori's concept. That dip in comfort we feel when something looks almost human but not quite right. It triggers revulsion, unease.
I definitely felt it seeing videos of Sophia, the humanoid robot. Impressive, but also unsettling.
It's a very common reaction. Her movements, facial expressions advanced, but just slightly off from human norms. And that subtle offness is what triggers the uncanny valley effect.
Does the robot's potential consciousness even matter if its appearance makes us profoundly uncomfortable? It really makes you think about our own built-in reactions.
It absolutely does. Because the uncanny valley isn't just about aesthetics. It's likely rooted in our own evolved cognitive mechanisms. Our brains hack for detecting subtle abnormalities that might signal disease, danger, or something fundamentally other.
What causes it cognitively?
Several things might be at play. Perceptual mismatch, your brain gets conflicting cues, like a realistic face but jerky movements. Violation of social norms, subtle errors in expression or timing that break our implicit rules for interaction.
And maybe deeper fears.
Some theories suggest it triggers subconscious anxieties. Fear of illness, death. Robots often look corpse-like in the valley. Or even existential fears about being replaced, about what makes us uniquely human.
Is it universal?
Not entirely. There seem to be cultural and generational differences, but it's a real barrier in designing human-like robots. Often, designers aim for more stylized or clearly artificial forms to avoid it. It's a reminder that our interaction with potential future consciousnesses is filtered through our own deep-seated psychology.
That's a fascinating link back to our own internal hacks. Okay, beyond AI, what about directly intervening in our brains, the era of neurotechnological alteration?
Yes, this is where hacking the mind becomes incredibly direct, precise, and potentially transformative. We're talking about brain-computer interfaces, BCIs.
BCIs, establishing a direct communication link between the brain and a device.
Exactly. Reading brain signals and translating them into commands, or potentially even sending information back into the brain.
And these come in different forms.
Right. You have non-invasive BCIs, like those EEG caps that read electrical activity from the scalp, and then invasive BCIs, which require surgery to implant electrodes directly onto or into the brain tissue.
Invasive sounds serious, but presumably offers higher fidelity.
Much higher fidelity, yes, allowing for more complex control. We've gone from early experiments just moving a cursor on a screen to people controlling sophisticated robotic limbs with thought alone.
That's incredible. And their use is evolving, right? From therapy to something else.
Massively. Initially, the focus was purely therapeutic, restoring communication for people with locked-in syndrome, enabling paralyzed individuals to control devices or limbs. Essential work.
But now?
Now, the potential extends far beyond rehabilitation. There's active research into using BCIs to enhance cognitive functions in healthy people. Memory restoration or augmentation, accelerating learning, maybe even new forms of sensory input.
Unlocking human neurocognitive potential, as the report puts it. Beyond BCIs, what other direct brain interventions are emerging?
We also have techniques like neuromodulation and biofeedback. Neurofeedback is particularly interesting.
How does that work?
It's non-invasive. You wear an EEG cap that monitors your brain waves in real time, and you get feedback, maybe visual or auditory, about your brain activity.
So you can see or hear what your brain is doing.
Yes. And through a process of operant conditioning, learning through reinforcement, you can actually learn to intentionally shift your brain into desired states, like training yourself to produce more alpha waves associated with relaxation or beta waves linked to focus.
So it's like giving your brain a mirror and letting it learn to regulate itself more effectively.
That's a perfect way to describe it, training the brain to self-regulate.
And the other one, TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation.
Right. This involves passing a very weak, constant electrical current through specific areas of the cerebral cortex using electrodes placed on the scalp.
Weak current. Is it safe?
Generally considered safe at the low levels used in research. The idea isn't to force neurons to fire, but to subtly modulate their excitability, making them slightly more or less likely to fire.
And what's that used for?
It's often used to temporarily improve cognitive performance online, meaning while the stimulation is active, things like boosting working memory, enhancing verbal fluency, maybe even speeding up learning on certain tasks.
Okay, so BCIs, neurofeedback, TDCS. What makes these fundamentally different from, say, meditation or psychedelics?
The directness of the causal link. Meditation and drugs work indirectly, influencing brain chemistry or training networks over time. These neurotechnologies provide a direct interface with the brain's electrical activity.
A BCI can read thoughts inside out and potentially write information or stimulate activity outside in.
Exactly. It offers the potential for bidirectional communication and control at the neural level.
This really feels like the most advanced kind of hack we've discussed.
It arguably is. It allows for bypassing natural mechanisms, directly modulating neural firing, potentially even imposing external patterns onto brain activity. It pushes the boundaries of neurocognitive potential and also raises some profound questions.
And that immense power inevitably brings us to some very deep ethical crossroads. Questions society is really only just starting to wrestle with.
Absolutely. Technologies that allow for directly hacking consciousness raise fundamental ethical questions, maybe none more central than autonomy.
Right. Does cognitive enhancement using tech to boost memory, focus, or mood infringe on our personal liberty, our freedom to be ourselves?
It's a huge debate. Some thinkers, like the philosopher Jürgen Habermas, worried that genetic or technological programming of desirable traits could essentially lock someone into a specific life path.
Committing them to a specific life project, as he put it, limiting their ability to freely shape their own identity and future.
That's the concern. That enhancement might paradoxically reduce true self-determination by pre-selecting or biasing certain traits or abilities.
But is there a counter-argument? Could these technologies actually enhance autonomy?
There's a strong counter-perspective, yes. If technologies can improve reasoning capacity, cognitive flexibility, or emotional regulation, couldn't that actually facilitate more thoughtful, deliberate, and autonomous decision-making?
If you can think more clearly or are less impaired by depression or anxiety, you might be more free, not less.
Exactly. So objections based purely on the idea that any enhancement automatically reduces autonomy might be too simplistic. But this immediately raises another huge issue:
Wish us.
social inequality. Access. Who gets these potentially life-altering enhancements?
If they're expensive or limited, you could create a massive gap between the cognitively augmented and the unaugmented.
Precisely. It's not just about a wealth gap, but potentially a consciousness gap. A future where fundamental mental capacities, memory, focus, learning speed, emotional resilience become stratified based on access to technology. That's a deeply concerning prospect.
It forces you to ask yourself, if you had the chance to upgrade your brain, would you? Knowing the potential societal cost, what would it mean for your sense of self?
Heavy questions, and these direct brain technologies challenge that sense of self, our very identity, in profound ways.
Oh, so.
The report mentions patient testimonials, people who've had deep brain stimulation devices implanted, for example, for Parkinson's or depression. Some describe feeling like they lose their own identity again when the device is turned off.
Wow. Their sense of self becomes dependent on the technology.
It powerfully suggests just how tightly our subjective sense of identity might be linked to the underlying neurobiological substrate. If you change the brain activity, you can fundamentally change the feeling of me.
Which brings us back to AI personhood too, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. If our identity is tied to our neurobiology, what about an AI? If it achieves consciousness, maybe verifiable by something like IIT's A measure, should it be granted rights? Personhood.
It's no longer just sci-fi speculation. It's becoming a real ethical and legal minefield we need to navigate.
Which is precisely why the field of neuroethics is growing so rapidly. It's dedicated to tackling these complex ethical, legal, and social implications of advances in neuroscience and neurotechnology.
We need that ethical framework more than ever. But even without direct brain implants, isn't the hacking of consciousness already happening in subtler ways?
Oh, absolutely. We experience it every day. Think about digital platforms, social media.
How are they hacking us?
They're designed to exploit the inherent vulnerabilities of human psychology, particularly our attention systems. They constantly trigger the brain's salience network.
The network that decides what's important, what grabs our attention.
Exactly. Notifications, likes, infinite scrolling feeds, they're all designed to hijack that network, making trivial things seem urgent and keeping us hooked.
Leading to that feeling of, what did the report call it? Endless loops of seeking without fulfillment.
Yes. It leverages our brain's dopamine system, the system involved in motivation and reward seeking. It keeps us scrolling, clicking, seeking that next little hit of information or validation. But it rarely leads to deep satisfaction. It drives desire without true fulfillment.
It sounds a lot like the tactics used in cybersecurity, social engineering.
There are definite parallels. Social engineering and cybersecurity exploit psychological biases, fear, trust, curiosity, authority to trick people into revealing information or granting access, phishing emails, fake urgency warnings.
They're hacking the person, not just the computer.
Exactly. And often the human mind is the most vulnerable point in the system. Understanding how these technologies, both sophisticated neurotech and everyday digital platforms, can intentionally or unintentionally hack our attention, emotions, and decision-making is becoming critical.
It's about awareness, isn't it? Protecting our own cognitive autonomy in an age where our minds are increasingly targeted.
Precisely. Being aware of the subtle nudges and manipulations is the first step towards regaining control and ensuring these powerful tools are used responsibly. Hashtag outro.
So we've covered an incredible amount of ground today, journeying through this amazing landscape of altered states of consciousness.
Yeah, from the natural narratives of dreams to the focused discipline of meditation and the spontaneous absorption of flow.
The profound chemical shifts from psychedelics, those edge-of-life insights from near-death experiences.
And looking ahead to the direct interventions of AI and neurotechnology.
And what really ties all of this together, this unifying thread, seems to be a core set of shared neurobiological principles.
Exactly. Each of these states or interventions, in its own way, modulates key neural networks, particularly that default mode network, the DMN.
Weakening its hold on self-referential thought, increasing cognitive flexibility, altering how information flows and integrates in the brain.
Whether it happens through gradual training over years, a powerful pharmacological catalyst acting in hours, or a direct technological intervention in real time, the fundamental goal, or effect, is altering the informational dynamics of your brain.
Reshaping subjective experience at its core. So where does consciousness research go from here?
The future really lies at the intersection of all these methods, integrating data from neuroimaging like fMRI and EEG with insights from neurochemistry via psychedelics, and the causal power of neurotechnologies like BCIs and neurofeedback.
A multimodal approach,
Yeah.
combining different angles.
Precisely. This will allow us not just to observe altered states, but potentially to induce them more precisely, analyze them more deeply, and quantify them with unprecedented accuracy. We're moving towards a much more comprehensive map of consciousness.
It feels like we're genuinely starting to get a scientific handle on something once considered utterly mysterious.
We're making incredible progress.
And this ability to hack the mind offers, well, staggering opportunities. Treating debilitating mental illnesses, maybe enhancing cognitive functions, improving well-being.
The potential benefits are immense. But, as we've discussed, this immense power carries equally immense ethical responsibilities.
We're standing on the cusp of being able to truly modify our own self-awareness, our inner experience, which forces us collectively to make some huge decisions.
Who gets access to these technologies? How do we ensure safety, privacy, prevent misuse? And maybe most profoundly, how do we preserve our sense of identity, our humanity, in a world where the very definition of self could become malleable, programmable, augmentable?
The journey into the inner space of consciousness is maybe the last great frontier of scientific exploration. And the decisions you and society make today will fundamentally shape the human experience for generations to come.
So, the final thought to leave you with is this. What does it mean for your identity, your sense of who you are, when the mind itself can potentially be programmed, rewired, or augmented? How much change is enhancement, and where might we draw the line? That's the deep question for all of us as we step into this new era.